Yo voy a entrar. ¿Qué tal? Bienvenidos al UANL IT Summit 2024. Informamos que esta conferencia tendrá subtítulos, ya que nuestra ponente es una especializada internacional de Estados Unidos, especialmente en el tema de AI. Welcome. Thank you for staying with us. Now begin the Specialized Conference Everyday AI, the Perpetual Student of Tomorrow, by Paula Carneiro Cox, SVP, Business Development and Partner Marketing of Wonderbot. Paula Carneiro Cox is the CVP of Business Development and Partner Marketing for Wonderbot, a global automation advisory firm, where she is responsible for AI adoption in both of the public and private sector. She simplifies technologies to business users in order to help organizations undergo enterprises-wide digital transformation efforts. She helps restore humanity to the workforce by eliminating robotic work. She is also an advisory board member of the Intelligent Automation Initiative and the Center for Business Civic Engagement, helping drive AI adoption in government, corporate, and the future workforce through higher education. This is the Specialized Conference, Everyday AI, the Perpetual Student of Tomorrow. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everybody. I am honored to be here, thrilled to be a participant, and I'm always looking for opportunities to evangelize AI. So let's go ahead and get this presentation started. All right. Fantastic. So today's conversation is going to be about practical AI. All of us have heard about the buzzword as we've been moving through different school systems, different social media platforms. We've seen celebrities turn into different characters of themselves, and ChatGPT has revolutionized the way that people write essays, right? But what does that mean in the business world? And what does that look like for students who are thinking about what their future is going to look like in a world of AI? Well, let's get into it, because not every career track begins with a traditional university or education associated with IT, but sometimes it does. So I'll go ahead and walk you through my story on how I got to be part of the AI journey. So I started my career at Research in Motion, which some of you might recognize as BlackBerry. It actually might be dating myself completely to be talking about BlackBerry because it's an obsolete technology at this point. But at the time, it was at the cutting edge. The only president, of any world leader that used any kind of smartphone, it had to go through Research in Motion. It was the most secure platform at the time, and it was where all transmission of government data and information went through. Well, times changed very quickly, and one of the reasons, looking back on my career, that Research in Motion ceased to exist as the company that it is, was because they didn't believe in open source. So actually, the beginning of where things started to go wrong for Research in Motion was because they failed to recognize the early inception of what we now call AI mainstream. I then moved on to R.R. Donnelley, where I spent a lot of time as a business analyst. My job was explaining how IT could work for business users. It was another flavor of understanding emerging technology, but it was important for me to recognize that it was a special skill to be able to translate technology into business terms. It's a special skill to this day because typically folks are wired either to have the business sense or the tech acumen. And AI is a beautiful place where those two come together. And I began to find my niche at R.R. Donnelley. I then moved on to traditional consulting. So you guys might have heard of Ernst & Young, maybe doing some internships with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte, some of those big names in consulting. I worked for an organization called RGP. And what I was tasked to do was find areas where businesses could optimize their operations by having technology present. So once again, I was on the cusp of technology, I was in technology, and I was around technology. And I began to understand that this special skill that I had acquired of translating business challenges to technology solutions was something that was kind of catching on in the workplace. So fast forward now, I'm at a company called Wonderbots, and we are an AI shop. So Wonderbots is an organization where my responsibility every day is to tell the story of how AI transforms business. So everything that I did in my career while I didn't know it led me to the position that I'm in today. Now, I started off as an analyst, and now I'm head of marketing for my firm. And the reason that I'm a successful marketer is because I've learned how to do it in the field. I have practical experience with translating technology to business users. And that leads to AI. The best thing that ever happened to me in my job was last year when ChatGPT blew up and the whole world all of a sudden understood what AI really was. It was an accelerator. It was a way that things could move faster. It was a way to transmit data at record speed. It was a way to remove the mundane tasks, the data entry, the calculations from everyday work so that humans could go back to being humans and using their brains and using their hearts and being able to come up with what the world is going to look like in the future, where machines and humans collaborate. And that's really what AI is about. So it's a nebulous term to many, but if you really think about it for what it is, it's the greatest way to speed up the transmission of data to perform any business task. I'm going to go through this presentation, but I definitely left time to make sure that we get to questions and answers. This is going to be your time, and we want to make the most of it. So moving right along, let's go into the traditional definition of what is AI. So AI is a technology discipline, right? And we actually embed it within another type of technology called robotic process automation, which Gartner, one of the analysts that you guys will hear a lot about as you move along in your careers, has named an umbrella called intelligent automation. So the intelligent part is the AI. The automation is the part that we've been doing for a long time, automating processes, making things go faster, right? So the power of AI is in its ability to be responsive. It can ask and then task what's supposed to happen next. It's a very critical piece of the component, right? It has responsiveness because it can be trained to understand what it is that a human would most likely come up with if they were tasked with the question. So the responsiveness is a huge part of what AI gives us as far as value goes. The decisiveness. Have you ever been at a crossroad where you're trying to figure out what you should do? If you should say yes to an approval or no to another? Maybe not yet in your college careers, but trust me, that's something that comes up often. And usually precedent is what determines the outcome. So if you've never decided before, the AI is probably not going to know what you want to decide now. But once we start feeding data into an AI model and give it the terms that we would decide as humans, AI begins to become decisive. It's adaptive. It can ingest a tremendous amount of new data. How many books have you guys been through in your college careers to date? A bunch. Have you memorized every single word? Do you know everything that's going to be on the next test? Not yet, but AI is going to certainly streamline the way that we get educated because there's a tremendous amount of data that can be ingested and categorized to make sense of things. You know, when I was in college, one of the things that I never understood is why there wasn't connectivity with the different classes that we took, right? So I'd be taking, some science class or biology, for example, and we'd be talking about, I don't know, archaic things in Mesopotamia. And at the same time in history, I was learning about the type of people that traversed across original ancient Mesopotamia. But there was no connection point between the two, the fossils that were found and the people that wandered across there. AI has the ability to categorize and classify a whole bunch of information that to the human might not seem like it's connected, but it begins to connect dots. It's because of that tremendous adaptive nature of AI that humans, we kind of struggle with that a little bit inherently. AI gives us a boost. It allows us to get there faster because it allows us to ingest large amounts of data. You'll hear the term LLM, large language models. It's a lot of data. That's what the translation is. And that's really what we're talking about, is the ability to ingest data at record speed with structure in a way that a human could never consume independently at that amount of, at that pace. Then it's independent. So there's a great deal of autonomy, right, that comes with having an AI agent able to help, right? There's a lot of decision making that can happen, like a practical use case in a finance and accounting department, for example. If something needs to be approved, if it's over, 200 pesos, let's go with a Mexican currency, then the answer is an automatic approval. And AI can independently approve that. And then anything that needs maybe the boss to look at or somebody else to calculate, AI can independently say, all right, this needs another human touch. This needs a little look. It's a tremendous amount of offsetting the type of work that 10, 15, 20 years ago is why we staffed up in the workplace to have these different occupations covered. Today, we have the equivalent of a machine. It's almost like a virtual assistant in the form of AI that can help make some of these decisions and streamline the way business is done. This stat came from Gartner. And it's tremendous if you think about the economic market that we're going into. And as you guys get closer to graduation and get closer to figuring out what you are going to be when you grow up, because trust me, even though I'm considered grown up, I still think every day, what's the next thing going to be? What is it that I'm going to grow up to be? What is it that I'm going to give back, right? And if you look at the potential of AI and what it can do, that's a tremendous impact that we're going to see by 2030. In such a short time, it's one of the categories that's been tremendously accelerated and infinitely funded. Every PE firm, every organization that gives money to organizations, companies like Wonderbot, startups like mine, it's all about AI and the power that it has. So any field, anything that you're studying, anything that you're going into, from nursing all the way to finance and accounting and back, is going to have some element of AI driven into the day-to-day tasks of what you do. It's the future, and the future is now. So let's go through a little bit of history, right? I would not be doing my job as Professor P of the day if I didn't give you guys a little taste of the evolution of AI. So the truth is, even though we heard this all come on the scenes between 2022 and 2023, the birth of AI was actually in the 1950s. Why? Because think about what I said that AI is. It's decisive and it can give you outcomes. So the beginning of that was a handy little piece of equipment that we now call a calculator. So there was predictability in a machine that learned that when I type in 1 + 1, the output is going to be 2. That's an early indicator of transmitting a lot of data to make a machine do something that a human could do. It's a very basic example, but if you put it into context that way, it makes it easier to digest these difficult concepts like AI, right? Moving right along, we had the rise of ML. So my industry loves acronyms, loves. So ML is machine learning. So what is machine learning? Well, after several times of performing the same task, coming up with a decision over and over and over again, approved by humans, the rise of ML means that the machine begins to learn. You've probably seen this in the form of factories, assembly lines, different areas where that kind of comes to pass. And it turned into something that became software as well, right? So in software, the machine begins to learn based on code. So for any of you who have done any kind of coding in any kind of capacity or just know what it is, the ability to put in code gives the machine the answers to the test, so to speak, right? And once the machine understands the answers to the test, it won't ever get that answer wrong again. We call that machine learning. Then on to what we call a concept in the early 90s, beginning of 2000s, it was called NLP, natural language processing. This was the beginning of those agents that you probably have come across where you say, speak to an agent, speak to an agent, speak to an agent. That's the technology that understands you saying speak to an agent means that equivalent of pressing 0. It's the equivalent of saying, I want to speak to a customer service person, which used to just be a button that you'd press on those kind of things. That's an example of NLP, of natural language processing. The machine understands what the human says and begins to put it into place. The transcription of this conference right now, every word that I'm saying, that Teams, the machine is understanding, ingesting, and turning around and adding to words, that's NLP. That's a technology very nascent that has developed and come a long way. Now, a lot of people try to act like that can take the place of customer service. I am very old school and don't believe that's the case, but the technology has power in and of itself. And it's helped in use cases like legal firms trying to understand and make sense of some of the court transcripts or a very long case or revisiting evidence. There's a lot of examples of how NLP has come to pass. And hopefully by now in these first 3 examples, you're beginning to see where AI is infused, because AI is where we're able to see machines starting to make decisions for us, with us, to help us. Computer vision, and image recognition. So this is where the eyes of these robots, software robots, began to come to pass, right? And that means that just by looking at something, you probably have had the equivalent of a CAPTCHA, right? If the computer is trying to recognize that you're not a robot, you'll get maybe a pretty little sign that says, click every single button that has a train track, right? And what it's doing is it's trying to make sure that you're a human. Until such time, the computer wasn't able to determine whether it was a train track or not. That was advanced machine learning. Well, excuse me, let me take a sip of this water real quick. Computer vision and image recognition is now mainstay. Robots can hack all of those because this technology is now 25 years later and has gotten a lot better, right? But that's another nascent form, a modular term that was early AI inception. Then we got to this place where the government, organizations like Meta, Google, Microsoft started getting in trouble with governments, right? You guys have seen that on the news. And as such, this concept of ethical AI came to pass. And it became incumbent on organizations using technology like CAPTCHA and using things like voice-activated responses when you're calling customer service to give answers that were more human and to understand when it wasn't appropriate to have a machine step in. So this advent of ethical AI was really kind of a turning point in the responsibility of organizations to say, you know what, this AI thing can potentially get out of hand. We want to make sure that there's a little bit of governance around it. Data security and data privacy was another component of this responsible AI, right? Because how is it that you're going to get smarter about my medical chart, for example, without having my medical chart go to the World Wide Web for you to validate my symptoms against somebody else's? There began to be a gray area that emerged, and organizations were tasked with making it clear where data was coming from. Just remember, the AI doesn't work unless it has data. It doesn't just intrinsically know things, it knows what it's fed. And the largest language models, the LLMs that are the largest, are usually on the World Wide Web. They're out there for everybody to consume, and therefore ethical and social responsibility is incumbent on us so that it's not leaked, your information isn't exposed, and there's not any concern about data leakage or data privacy. Moving right along, we've got several AI in industry. So several of the places where we used to say, oh, maybe someday, it began to come to pass, right? So now you probably have seen that nurses have charts, right? That they're able to input some of the information, and then based on what they put in the information comes back a list of medications that potentially can be suggestive, right? Universities are getting smarter about different places where, it looked like it cut out there for a minute. Sorry about that, guys. Universities are getting smarter about where it is that they're teaching students to kind of get different information, right? Back in my day, I used to have to check out a book and go through microfiche and take a look at one thing versus the other. and take computer turns in the library to be able to get on the World Wide Web. Today, we don't have to do that. And education is actually one of the industries, the higher education space, where AI is being adopted, not only in what we teach on the front end of school, but how schools are operating on the back end. You notice that some organizations, some universities have different cultural variances, right? And so in different types of education and different types of schools, there's different types of curriculum. Well, how do you start matching the type of students that a university wants to ingest? How do you figure out the type of university that is going to have all technology students? How does the university figure out what high schools to go to, what regions, what cities to hire and retain, well, it's not hiring, but to attract the best and the brightest students to go to their university? The workforce does the exact same thing. So AI has been infused into industries, even in your backyard in education. We now have really seen this concept of generative AI. So this is where the developer no longer has to be a developer. And this is really where my career has been full circle. Because while I was always very good at explaining tech to business, I was never a techie. My husband, my friends, they'll all tell you first that Paula's not the one that knows how to download the next iPhone update, right? It's not my forte. I'm not a techie. But what I am is a logical thinker that can take pragmaticism and apply it to business, right? So now with this concept of generative AI, watch out, world, because this non-techie person can now code Python. You know how? I say, hello, I'd like you to give me Python code for moving my email to a folder so that everything that comes from the university, any school in Mexico is going to go to this inbox, and I'll know exactly the student that sent it to me. And Python will code something and say, is this what you wanted it to do? And I'll say, almost. Actually, I want it to be in that folder. And it'll adjust the code for me. And I don't even have to know how to speak Python language. That is what generative AI is. It's being able to generate code, generate AI by speaking in human words to the machine. So we're now at a point where the machine can collaborate with us, and we essentially speak the same language. Think of generative AI like the Rosetta Stone of today. It's the great translator between human and machine, and it's a very, very powerful place to be. The future of AI is what's to come. So I was talking about this probably 3 years ago, and everybody was looking at me with their eyes glazed over like, that's so far away. There's no way that's coming down the pike anytime soon. And guess what? It's here. I've been talking about the future of work for almost 10 years, telling everybody that the future of work is now. And now what we're finally saying is that AI is the future, and we're in it. So everybody, I challenge you to do a little Google, to do a little search. Microsoft Copilot's probably going to come up on your search engine if you use Bing. Google's agent's going to come up and give you some ideas too. But it's your responsibility to begin to understand what the future of AI means and how it applies to you in your career. All right. So blurring the lines between human and machine work. I gave you some examples of where this could potentially be. But it's really important to kind of see where the jobs are coming to pass, right? And where they belong, the different types of work that are there, right? So the evolution of the job roles, it's what some of the stuff that I've already described to you, that things have changed. The traditional accountant is no longer using a calculator, right? The traditional operations specialist is no longer just looking at their computer for what they've done in the past, right? And even the nurses and doctors are charting in a different way that's more technologically savvy and more indicative of today's workforce and what it is that they're doing, right? Then there's this concept of augmentation of human capabilities. It's what I just described. So just because Paula can now be a developer doesn't mean that there's not a job for a developer out there. On the contrary, the smart developer of tomorrow is going to be the one that understands, I don't have to spend all my time writing this code. I can speak the code, tweak the code, and then make sure that it is adequate to what it is that we need to do for the business. I just need to make sure that I validate that this code is what we want it to do and what we want it to be. Then there's the human-machine collaboration, some of the examples I've already given. This is where you really get to a point where there's even tools called autopilot, for example, where you can have, if there's something that you do every day, maybe you check on a class and then you go to Blackboard and then you email your instructor and then you have to message your group or post something on your campus board to say that you participated in an activity. You can actually code and program a little AI agent to get smarter about what you have to do. And then eventually the little agent can prompt you and say, hey, Paula, did you want to meet with your class that you meet with every Wednesday at 4 o'clock? Should I put that in your calendar? And it's not that you're offsetting the day-to-day work that humans are supposed to do. You're freeing your mind to do the things that humans only can do. If the machines can help us with certain things, why wouldn't we let them? So we can go back to the business of being human. We can go back to handwriting cards for Mother's Day or birthdays, right? We can go back to doing the human things that humans are intended to do by letting and leveraging the work of an AI agent. The importance of machine and human symbiosis is going to be more and more crucial, especially with you guys entering the workforce. It's going to be crucial to make sure that your leadership understands that you don't have a fear of technology, that you embrace technology. I think this might be a special school that already has that forward-thinking mindset. But even still, as individuals, it's important to look and see and adapt to what you can do. And guess what? If somebody said that when you graduate, you're done learning, I hate to burst your bubble. It never ends. The reason I named this topic the perpetual student is that I attribute my success to the fact that I never stop learning. I spend at least 10 hours a week learning emerging technologies, studying where my competitors are, understanding what type of technology is on the scene, seeing where the trends of what AI is doing is beginning to do, where people are going, what kind of jobs people are seeking. Because that's the future of work, is understanding how my world and what I do and how AI collaborates with the future of work in universities all the way through to the workforce of today and the clients that actually buy these type of things from my organization. So for me, it's very important to understand the life cycle of student, practitioner, and the buyer. And all of us are consumers of AI, whether we know it or not. So it's better to be in the know. All right, so the impact of generative AI in the education sector, right? I thought this was just interesting because you guys are in school and are part of this, right? Just to kind of see where it is that this has been going and the impact that it has on higher ed. So it really, if you look at this from a time scale, from left to right, we've gotten to a point where we can truly see the AI accelerated information growth. So it's the basics of AI is the ability to ingest a tremendous amount of data. That's at its core what it's intended to do, what it does, and what we really, the value of it. Then what do we do to make sure that we can keep up, right? Because it's only, all this information is only as good as our ability to absorb it and then action it, right? So what do we do? How do we develop skills? What do we do to make sure that we know what's next? How do we ensure that the models are correct? Who do we trust? How do we know that, the AI didn't get a wrong answer on the test originally, and maybe it learned a wrong answer over and over again? And that's where governance comes into play. And that's where the validation of some of these come, so that we can get smarter and better at understanding what we should trust versus what we shouldn't. Some of the places in education where we can see human effectiveness improved is the time it takes to do anything. It decreases by almost 40% if you are relying on humans to help you. That is awesome. Why wouldn't you do that? Why would you be afraid of that? I would love to have my test studying and my, the work that I had to do in college cut by 40%. It doesn't mean that I didn't need to learn it to take the test, but I was able to take studying in a more efficient way because today I study. I'm a perpetual student of AI. And I promise you, I'm not making near as many note cards as I was when I was in college. And the reason is that my AI is able to ingest data and give me exactly what I need to know. I look at the stock reports for companies that are clients of ours. I look at how our partners are performing. I look at the impact of global issues and macro factors on our clients and on the industries that we serve. We have a lot of oil and gas companies. There's been a war going on, in case you hadn't noticed, and that's impacted greatly the bottom line of some of our clients. It's my responsibility to know that. But I don't have time to go to every single website all over the World Wide Web and figure that out. So as a perpetual student, as somebody who's always at the forefront of AI, what do? I let my AI agent aggregate the information that I need to know about my clients and partners so that I can go back to being human. Output increased by 18%. Another tremendous impact, right? So imagine if you were able to increase the volume that's quality, right? Quality information that you're putting out there at an 18% increase. Here's the simulated bar exam, 10%, top 10% with the study factors of AI. So having generative AI can improve human effectiveness. Doesn't mean the machines are going to take over, but it sure means that we should probably get smarter about how we interact with them and embrace them. It can also make us careless, right? So there's the downside of what we're looking at too is 87% reported less mental effort on repetitive tasks. So this is something that you need to kind of take with a grain of salt. You guys aren't in the workforce yet. Maybe some of you have some jobs while you're studying, but I promise you, back in the day when my job, early days, was to aggregate reports when I worked at BlackBerry about who would access data centers and transmit data, and I would be taking Excel spreadsheet after Excel spreadsheet after Excel spreadsheet and classifying it and organizing it and pivot tabling it. I did not have a very sound mental health, right? I'm doing the same thing again. I was too smart for that. I was too creative for that, right? And I was looking at these repetitive tasks going, is this really what the workforce is? And the answer is, yeah, it was at the time, but thank God it's not anymore, because we can now embrace that to get better, right? Then information that's overlooked, this is another important stat. Again, the machine is only as smart as the humans that give it information or the information that it has accessible. So we do have to make sure that we check it. And again, we're working together with the machines. We're not saying that the machines are going to take over. So how do you develop those user skills? How do you ensure validity of those answers? Which models do you trust? That's the crux of what the organizations of today are looking to do, right? That's exactly the answer that every single governing body in the, in the tech world, for example, going up in Congress in the United States over and over again. That's what they're responsible for doing and tasked with understanding is how are we going to change the way that we look at these things? What is it that we're going to trust, and what areas of impact are we going to take a look at differently? And that's what we're still trying to figure out to this day. That's exactly where we sit in the world of AI. There's always implications to change, right? Another very human trait is that we're often not the best at change. We're often not the best at being resilient. We're often a little bit concerned when it comes to changing the way that things go, right? We're not naturally okay with change. They say some of the biggest stressors that humans have are when it comes to moving or getting married or having a baby. Life changes, graduating college, right? We don't typically love change. So it's no secret that with something this monumental that's touching every industry at the same time, from student to retiree and back, it's going to be a monumental seismic shift. You saw the amount of GDP that's going to impact. It's a tremendous amount of trillions of dollars that's going to be impacted by 2030. That's a very short amount of time to have such a revolutionary change in technology. So where are some of the places that we're seeing this, right? Education content. It's a very obvious place that we're going to see it, right? I think we're going to see a lot more changes and a lot more impact in the way that students are taught, because the way that students are taught in the university is getting better to align with the way that work is and what the real world looks like, but it's not completely there. It's still a lot of theory and not as much practice. With this change, we'll begin to infuse and you'll be able to absorb a lot more, right? And you'll be able to see some of the impact of how generative AI can really revolutionize the way you learn. Higher education institutions are adopting operating models that have teaching and work practices that kind of come together. Again, practical AI. That's what we're seeing. We're not trying to change the way everything works, but one thing at a time, we're really trying to change the way that people learn, that people ingest information, and more importantly, the way that humans and machines interact. 65% of higher education CIOs will identify improving operating margins as digital technology investments continue to mature. So more and more, the universities are beginning to understand it's our job to have technology for our students to use and leverage so that we prepare them for the next generation of work. It's great to learn about ancient Mesopotamia and the correlating bones that were found, thousands of years before. Not saying that there's anything wrong with any of those education tracks. I think history is what made me the great storyteller that I am today. What I am saying, though, is that it's imperative that AI and the technology emerging at any given time, because there's going to be another flavor that's going to be on my little history map here soon with another type of robot, with another type of technology. Schools must always be at the forefront of technology that's emerging. And more, I think we're beginning to see that. And by the hires and the way that CIOs are interacting with the universities, we're beginning to see that change happen. And you guys are the future. It's up to you to make that change something that is embraceable, something that the workforce can handle. And as the generation now is starting to retire and you guys are starting to come in, it's more important than ever that all the generations work together to understand the magnanimous impact that we can all have if we have the same mindset and an understanding of how to have responsible AI. So the future is now. I will say that over and over and over and over and over again, right? We're at the point where we're getting kind of accredited. We're getting the regulatory bodies. People are starting to come into play. But if you look at this little chart as something that you should independently adopt, that's what I am trying to say today, right? So learn a little, get accredited. There's a lot of free university options, a lot of courses on the internet that help you with this. YouTube, free. Go on it. Google AI lesson. You'll find something. You might even find me. There's different ways that you can go about learning what it is that you need to do next to be a change agent of the future. Then you'll begin to understand how it applies to whatever your chosen field is. The person that interviews best in today's world, and I'm a hiring manager, is the person that shows up to the table and says, not only do I understand and think I'm qualified for this, this, and this in your job description, but I know that AI is here, it's now, and I'm ready to embrace that in however your organization plans on infusing it. That's a powerful statement and something that you guys can take, but only if you start to learn it, only if you become part of it, and you become part of the conversation by being part of the accreditation. That's where innovation comes into play. Do you think that comes from just a group full of people in a room in a think tank? Absolutely not. Innovation is something that comes from the masses. If you look at something as simple as influencer marketing on social media, how many scrolls do you go through on Instagram before you get the same ad over and over again? Where did that come from? Innovation by following human behavior. Large language models that said what Paula likes on Instagram versus what Sergio likes on Instagram versus what Priscilla likes on Instagram. And then all of a sudden, Paula, Priscilla, and Sergio, in their own rights, get the ads that are supposed to be there. That's innovation. We went from billboards and Super Bowl ads to scrolling ads. That's innovation. It's subtle, but that's how the world works. And then we get to a point where we see it at scale. We see AI growth and scale at mass. And that's what you guys are going to be part of. That's the workforce that you're going to be working in and the area where you're going to be teaching and mentoring the future of work that comes after you. So as artificial intelligence evolves, we all have to remember that the power lies not in replacing human intelligence, but in augmenting it. There's not going to be an AI as special as me or as special as you. That's never going to happen. But there is a way that an AI can allow me to be in 7 places at once because I can handle tasks in a very different way and get effective about the way that I do my work. The true potential of AI lies in the ability to amplify human creativity and ingenuity. It's not about tech. It's not about replacing the human. It's about augmenting the human. It's about making us smarter, better, more empathetic thinkers. It's about giving us the opportunity to be kind because we're not frustrated doing mundane work. It's the way that we get to learn more. It's the way that we get to travel virtually. It's the way that we get to better plan. What's our dream? What's our hope? What are all the things on the internet that I didn't even know to search? What are all the different areas of exploration that I didn't even know I wanted to learn? What book am I supposed to read next? Where should I be spending my time? What should I be doing differently? How can I increase the way that my outcomes are done so that I have more free time after work? How do I work smarter, not harder? What are the things that I need to do to increase my access to other people around the world with different thoughts and different walks of life and different cultural assimilations that maybe I wasn't exposed to? These are the areas where we can begin to have machines revert us back to being intrinsically human. Because at the end of the day, the special part is being the human. The smart human knows when to augment with a machine. Thank you so much, guys. I really, really appreciate your time. I wanted to give you guys my my information here as well. You feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. And I don't know if the hosts are still there, but let me know if we have time for questions or if there was anything that came in throughout the course of the presentation. I'm happy to answer. Right. Any questions? All right, Leslie, there you are. Okay, fantastic.
We thank Paula Carneiro Cox for this specialized conference. And now, if you allow us to go to the question and answer section. Now we have 3 questions. I'm going to tell the first. What is the future of the university with the inclusion of AI?
What is the future of a university with the inclusion of AI? Yeah, okay. So I think it's some of what I talked about today, but I think what we're really going to start to see is that universities will be better equipped to take some of your learnings, perhaps your transcript, some of the areas where you were great and some of the areas where maybe you struggled, and help you formulate a good idea for what your future of work should look like. So I really believe that AI is going to help us get smarter about giving students the confidence to go into an industry or area of work that they're really going to feel passionate about.
Okay, well, that is so interesting, and I want to say the second question.
Of course.
What should we learn? What should we learn, and what did you advise if we want to learn more about the AI?
Absolutely. So I am a big believer in having a widget on my Chrome. So I have on Chrome, I have AI as a buzzword. Anything that comes along. So Microsoft just launched Copilot. Google's fighting for another large language model. There's a lot of organizations that are buying little data sets. So I get notified anytime there's some critical information about AI. So that's one thing, but I'm old school, right? I can't consume data as fast as any of you guys can. The other thing that I would suggest is finding on LinkedIn, start getting to know LinkedIn, because I know we're all Instagram fans at this age, you know, but trust me, LinkedIn is going to be your next best friend, and follow AI's keywords, right? And not just AI, search artificial intelligence. Okay. And then begin to follow the different groups and conversations and talk tracks that have to do with that. Look at my company, Wonderbox. We post different use cases and areas of study every day because I believe firmly in educating the masses for them to understand where and how they can better get equipped for that. So it's really just about exposing yourself, right? And understanding that this stuff changes every day. So keep an eye of curiosity about you because it's going to change from today to tomorrow. And it's important to keep the pulse on consistently so that you're always ahead of the game.
Okay, and that's what about the important about the searching and like search in the web about the AI. And now the last question: do you consider that AI is a tool that will replace humans?
That it will open humans?
Replace.
Oh, replace. Okay.
Yes.
So no. There's no way to replace humans. There's no way for, I have an itchy nose and you guys are going to remember the girl that has the itchy nose as she talks, and I'm quirky in the way that I speak and I probably come off approachable, and then you guys can send me an email. And AI is never going to have personality. And AI is never going to have those human characteristics. They're never going to write you a card. They're never going to thank you. They're never going to have the empathy and intrinsic nature that a human is. So absolutely not. AI is not going to replace humans. What it will do is replace tasks. It will replace things that humans used to do because we didn't have machines that could do it. So it's important to make sure that in any career move that you make, that you're doing something that also requires human intervention, human touch, and human consideration, because those are going to be the jobs that last, especially if you begin to understand how to infuse AI into them.
Wow. So thank you. We are so grateful that you have joined us, and a pleasure to have met you. Now we present the recognition for your valuable participation today in the UANL IT Summit. La Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León otorga a Paula Carneiro Cox el presente reconocimiento por su participación en la conferencia especializada Everyday AI, The Perpetual Student of Tomorrow, en el marco del UANL IT Summit 2024. Alere Flaman Veritatis, Ciudad Universitaria, Nuevo León, 23 de mayo de 2024. Firma el doctor Mario Alberto González de León, Director General de Tecnologías y Desarrollo Digital. We thanks again, on behalf of the Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León, to Paula Carneiro Cox for her outstanding participation in this fourth edition of the UANL IT Summit 2024. With this specialized conference, we conclude the fourth day of conferences of this great event. I hope you have a very nice day. I am Jania Araiza, and stay tuned for the UANL IT Summit 2024, Connecting with the Future. Thank you for being here.
Muy amable. Gracias a todos.
Thank you, Paula.